Coming down this morning. In a special way, I want to thank the members of the Woodbridge Police Department who have joined us for this ceremony this morning. We're standing in the rear of the auditorium. Today is a sad day, but sometimes we have to remember sad days. And we remember these days so that they don't happen again. And more importantly, we remember days like this so we don't forget the people who lost their lives today. The time is now 8:46. And at 8:46 on Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, a life-altering event happened. So if you just stand right now, please, for a moment of silence. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and the playing of the National Anthem.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As I mentioned, I'm very pleased and honored to have the members of the Woodbridge Police Department here with us. Also our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Cipriano, and our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Dr. DeNobili. Thank you for joining us here this morning. It's strange when you think back 14 years ago, and when I speak to people who are only 17 or 18 years old, who don't have a clear remembrance of what happened on that day. But Tuesday, September 11, 2001 started out. It was a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday morning. Most schools had just returned. The sky was blue. It was election day in New York City. And at 8:46, word started to come out of New York about what we thought was just a horrible accident. We heard a plane had flown into the World Trade Center. No one really knew what happened. There wasn't a lot of video at the time. But then we realized planes had been hijacked and America was under attack. We learned at 9:02, we learned later, a second plane would hit the South Tower. Then we knew what was going on. We heard about Flight 93 that was hijacked, and whose target we really don't know. Was it the U.S. Capitol? Was it the White House? We don't know where that plane was headed. But we know that the passengers of Flight 93 took over that plane And unfortunately, it crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. But what other damage might have been done had the passengers on that plane not acted? We learned later that the plane had hit the Pentagon and the lives that were lost there. The definition of a hero is an ordinary person doing extraordinary things. And I think that's what we saw on September 11th. Nobody woke up that morning and said, I think I'm going to be a hero today. But just ordinary people going to work, doing their job, were called on to do heroic actions. And many of those people saved other lives and unfortunately lost their own lives. Those are the people that we honor today. Those are the people whose lives we remember 14 years later so that they were not lost in vain. My oldest brother is a police officer, and you might laugh at this. I got home that day, and on my answering machine, I don't even know if we still have answering machines. I don't think we make answering machines anymore. The light was flashing, and I pushed the button, and it was a message from my brother. And he said, Russ, do me a favor. I can't get a hold of Mom. Tell her we're going to New York. We don't know how long we're going to be there, and we don't know when we're coming back. Not the message you want to hear from one of your family members. And by 1 o'clock in the morning, when I hadn't heard back from him yet, I couldn't sleep, and I drove over to his house, and I sat on his front steps. And finally, at 3 o'clock in the morning, he came home. He said, for the next, we don't know how long, we're going to be working 12 hours on, 12 hours off. They were meeting right here at Giant Stadium in the parking lot, going in on buses downtown, and just digging through the rubble. And that's what he did for about 3 or 4 weeks. Every day, 12 hours on, and then 12 hours off. This day means a lot to a lot of people. A lot of people who still won't even talk about what happened that day. But we remember those people, and we remember them well. Now we're going to light some candles. And I've asked 5 students to join me, if you would join me up here on stage. We'll now light 5 symbolic candles in memory of the 2,801 lives that were taken so suddenly. We pledge to remember them not just as a number, but as mothers and fathers, daughters and sons, sisters and brothers, parents, relatives, and friends who enriched our world with their many talents and gifts. Candle number 1. We light candle number 1 in honor of the police officers who gave their lives and saved thousands of other people. Candle number 2. We light candle number 2 in honor of the firefighters who gave their lives and saved thousands of people. Candle number 3. We light candle number 3 in honor of the emergency medical workers who gave their lives and saved thousands of people. Candle number 4. We light candle number 4 to honor the passengers and crew of Flights 11, 175, 77, and Flight 93, who lost their lives. Candle number 5. We'd like candle number 5 to honor the civilians in the North and South Towers of the World Trade Center who lost their lives. All 5 of these candles are also lit to remember all of the hopes and dreams of all those who lost their lives, to give strength to the survivors and courage to rebuild their lives, and to hope for a world where all of our precious freedoms keep us safe from harm. May the light of our candles light the world with hope and inspiration. We'll now have the reading of a very famous historical document written well before 9/11, the Gettysburg Address, which really expresses the feeling of a nation on a day like this.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But, in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work, which they, who fought here, have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
I want to thank you all for your attention this morning. Somebody once asked me, how long do you think after Pearl Harbor they stopped doing remembrance ceremonies? And I didn't have the answer to that question. This is 14 years later. And ask some of the teachers who were here 14 years ago, from a room like the art room or the home ec room, when you could look out and actually see the smoke coming out of the southern tip of Manhattan, and see the devastation. Or the F-16 fighter jets that were landing at Teterboro Airport. I was teaching at what was Assumption School that year. And by 12 o'clock, the students started to ask, what's going on? They knew something was different. And in my lifetime, this is one event that I could honestly say changed the entire world. There aren't a lot of events like this, thank God there aren't a lot of events like this in the world. But this is one event that changed our lives. It changed how we live. It changes who we are as a people. So we took a few moments today, and we remembered those who gave their lives, and those who continue to give their lives. Just last week, over 100 names were added to the fire department memorial in the city of New York. Firefighters who died from cancer-related and other breathing ailments which were caused by their work down at Ground Zero on the days and months after 9/11. So it's easy to criticize people. It's easy to pick on people and make fun of what people do. But you want to know something? When you see a policeman or you see a firefighter, why don't you thank them for what they do? Because none of them went to work that day knowing it was going to be their last day of work. And no one flinched that when the call of help came out, those are the people who responded. And because of them, so many people are alive. And those are the people we should thank, and we should continue to thank every day. So when you see a police officer on the street, or you go past the firehouse and maybe there's some firefighters out front, you know what? Thank them for what they do. Those are the real heroes. I know a lot of our musicians in today's world we hold up as heroes. They're not heroes. Heroes, like I said, are ordinary people who do extraordinary things. Those are the people you want to emulate in your life. Those are the people you want to be like. So, one final word, and I'll just leave you with this. The one thing I remember more than anything about 9/11 was my drive home that day. And I drove home, and people were actually courteous to other people. When I went to merge onto 17, somebody actually stopped and let me merge onto the road. For several weeks after that day, we were really nice to each other. We really looked out for one another, and we cared for one another. That's the feeling we need to have every day in this country. We need to look out for one another, and we need to take care of one another. We do it really well in a time of crisis. We should do it every day. And you should do it every day, just walking the halls of this building. Mr. Cipriano, Dr. Ginobili, the gentlemen of the police department, I want to thank you for joining us and being here today. Thank you to the band for your wonderful performance. Thank you. To the students who participated, I thank you. Thank you all for being so attentive. Have a good rest of the day.